Hello, my name is Joshua Lawler, and this is my portion of the oral presentation of our team analysis paper, The Current State of the NBA.
I am Gwennifer Lentz, and I'm presenting the facts and implementation portion of the current state of the NBA. To begin, we first have our first section, which is strengths. The first strength that the NBA has is the fact that they have existed for over 75 years. This has caused a very large and dedicated fan base since they've been able to follow throughout the years, follow the players, the sport in general, and they have been very successful in that. They also have a very diverse group of players since they do source throughout the whole country, as well as they have one team located outside of the US. They also have very talented players since they have very diverse sets of players. They like to source their talent they'll follow high schoolers, college players, train people through their G Leagues, which is their official minor league. They also have a very high revenue due to merchandising as well as screen time, but merchandising is a huge thing. You can go into Walmart and get your favorite jersey through your favorite team. The next section we have is weaknesses. The main weakness that we focus on in this presentation, in this report, is their issues with gambling, which causes integrity issues as well, which is a weakness. Their employees have a really bad issue with integrity issues due to gambling, because sports gambling is a really big problem in the US and throughout the globe. They also only have one team outside the US, which is posed as a weakness, since they are not fully investing and expanding. If they were to do this, it would bring more opportunities. They also have extremely high prices for games. Ticket prices right now are drastically increasing, which causes a lack of accessibility. The common day person is not able to go to games, especially if they're popular ones, big cities. They're not really able to because the prices are so high. They also have a very high reliance on star players. By relying on their star players, they're not allowing themselves to reach their full potential, because they will be losing viewership if that player is sitting on the bench, if that player is injured. They should be really star casing all their players, not just focused on one person for the team. We now will go to opportunities, which is that the main thing is that they really should be expanding globally. By doing so, they would be able to receive more revenue, more fans, more talent, all of that. They'll be able to follow people more. It would be a huge investment, and it could do really well for the league. They could also develop player streamlines overseas, be able to resource players more, talent, follow them through. It would be really beneficial. Another huge thing that they could do that would pose a really great opportunity is to reduce the price of tickets by not gouging them so much and using things like SeatGeek or whatever. They would be able to keep the prices lower, allowing more people to go to them that are the common day people, increasing their fan base. They should also create a G League overseas, which is their official minor league. This would allow for more talent resources, more training opportunities, and a real expansion in the league. If they were also to create new integrative content, whether it be through social media, cameos are really important for people feeling that they can connect. The fans really like that in terms of feeling like they are a part of this. Now, the threats that we're going to cover are, if they were to make any changes in the NBA or league policies, this could really affect players, coaches, fans, etc., by the way that they'll be able to function as a whole. A huge issue due to gambling is that people have been fixing games, meaning that they are forcing a certain outcome in order to obtain a certain amount of winnings through gambling. The US recession is also a huge issue because people are less likely to spend things on frivolous things, such as sporting events or things like that, because they are not necessities. So they will see a decrease in in-person viewership and revenue through in-person games. Another threat is a breach of data. Through viewership and content online and stuff like that, people feel very threatened of the idea that their data could be stolen. So having apps and things like that through the NBA, or ticket sales, data within their players, that being stolen can pose a huge threat. Also, just competing with other sports, whether it be through screen time, cable, streaming, anything like that. It's really hard to compete with any of that. And that concludes our SWOT analysis.
The mission statement with our paper was that the integrity of the NBA has been compromised and pushed into the spotlight amid the betting scandal and needs to be addressed. We will attempt to prove steps needed to restore integrity of the game with analysis within this report. For our visual, I created a pie chart which displays the amount bet in billions in 2024. Included within the pie chart was the NBA at $148 billion, soccer at $150 billion, and finally the NFL at $35 billion. The amounts bet from both Major League Baseball and the NHL were unavailable when I did my research.
I'm Mark, and I'll be going over the problem statement, alternative solutions, and best solutions. The NBA has a gambling problem, and recently several players and coaches have been arrested by the FBI in collusion with mob families or personal friends to fraud the NBA and the gambling public by giving out information about their unders or player minutes. And the NBA needs to step up here, or there could be real problems down the line for their business, because if there's an integrity issue when there's this much money on the table, I feel like the government is going to have to step in. The solutions that we came up with go as follow, but I want to expand upon it more because they vary in degrees, right? I think the issue right now is players are allowed to gamble on other sports. I think this builds a bad lesson for players. It gets them addicted to gambling, which could cause them to run into some problems where they may have to do some extracurriculars to, pay back people. It's just kind of the tale of the oldest time. Gambling has been linked with like mob ties and things like that for a long time. I think the NBA should have on the front end done a real account of what the potential pitfalls were for their league. So I don't think they should be allowed to bet on other sports. And I also believe that potentially removing player unders is a potential solution. I think that's just the one thing that players can absolutely control is faking injury, which we've already seen twice with Jonte Porter in Toronto and Terry Rozier when he was with the Charlotte Hornets, currently with Miami Heat. So I think looking at that as a potential option is really good, because I think right now you have to figure out like how can you protect players from themselves, and this is a potential method, right? Like betting the over is the only thing that should be allowed to be done if you choose this option. I think put the amount of money, put a cap. I think the sports books can put a cap on the amount of money that is gambled on player props, so that it can't be like we put $500,000 on an under to make quick money. It's a much slower process and becomes much more obvious if someone is on the take, and it could just be potential methods the NBA could consider. And like because of advertising, when you look at like how the league markets is marketing their partner, their sportsbook partner, whenever you turn on the NBA game, the pregame show, it's, oh, hey, this star player's over-under is 23.5. And this is a parlay that I put together. And this is the live line during the game. And during halftime, they're talking about it. And during the third quarter, like props pop up. And in the end of the game is, hey, this is where it currently stands. It's like the media partners that the NBA is with, and they're all incentivized right now to get people gambling, get people spending money. They can't verify They can't protect the public from their own product, which I think is such a conflict of interest. But it's just such like the NBA's leagues are so liable for so many things. Where it's like, hey, you're promoting gambling all throughout your sport in your event, and yet you can't guarantee that players aren't deliberately throwing games. And we've seen it before with Tim Donaghy and the referee scandal 15 years ago, where a referee was fixing games. Like the NBA is such a black mark on the sport, and yet there wasn't enough thought put into how do we prevent this from the future? How do we stop this? And now we're seeing players like Terry Rozier has been in the game for a very long time, made a lot of money. So if he can be easily on the take, a lot of other players probably also on the take. And that brings us to the best solution, which I think, you can obviously go a lot of different angles with this. But I feel like I think limiting the amount of exposure is where I would start. Like I said, I think that's just you're putting way too much emphasis on gambling throughout your whole sport. And I think that they need to consider mitigating some of these things until they can find a way to actually guarantee it's impossible for a player to do, which I think is very hard. But I think there's a lot of things they can do to try to prevent this. But if you continue to advertise it as such, what's stopping a class action lawsuit from hitting the NBA? So that's why I think, these best solutions here, like they got to partner with the sports books. They got to limit the advertising. They got to find a way to cap how much money is being spent in order to prevent any kind of government sanctions or cap class action lawsuits.
This is Guinevere Lentz, and I'm now presenting on the implementation section of our presentation. So, after looking at our best solution, in order to put that into action, we will need the NBA to partner with sportsbooks of all kinds in order to make formal agreements to stop the excess amount of wages placed on player props. In order to do so, they can have legislative if they want it to be federal, and it will also make the company look really good in order to make sure that they are showing that they are a very highly valued and integrity company. So by being able to set an example, hopefully other sports will be able to do the same. And it will really combat the issue that we're having with gambling in sports. Now, there are very serious risks that can come with this, but they will be averted by making an agreement between the sports books and the NBA league itself. By doing so, you won't have one going against the other. You won't have legislative being made and one loses revenue. By being able to work with each other, they can really make it a team effort and not have the sports books harm the NBA by having more gambling issues. And by making agreement with the sports books, they will avoid the risk of the sports books encouraging the use of more wages. Sports books will always want to obtain more revenue, but if you really partner with them and show them why it's an issue and how people are less likely to bet because they already know how the team is going to win, I know people will just try to make more revenue, but it will really allow for the game to be more enjoyable and not corrupt. We now have our timetable for our solution. To get off the ground is usually 6 months to a year. When I was doing research, that's how long it typically takes in order for legislative to be passed. The reason why it's important to have legislative be passed is because when you're doing this in a national setting, you want to be able to have the sports books follow all the rules set in place nationally. If you were to only do it with one set of sports books and just have it based on a partnership, they can always go back, they can always break that partnership. But if you make it a legislative and you make sure that it's actually passed through the courts, you'll be able to make sure that this can't be an ongoing issue and people aren't being harmed by this continuously. Now, the timetable for federal legislative is to be passed in order to combat sports betting issues could be several years because they have to vote, agree, and then they also have voters. They need to have voter approval for this as well, which can take usually a long time in the U.S. But by implementing partnerships, agreements, and legislative, we can combat the issue of corruption in the NBA due to gambling. By really having the NBA tackle this issue and not wait for other people to tackle the issue for them, they're able to put their best foot forward and really show that they see this issue, they want to tackle it, and put it into action. Thank you.
Finally, for the feedback section, I listed out the key people needed to restore the NBA's image and reputation. To start with, I named NBA Commissioner Adam Silver as the leading contact to help restore the league's reputation. The other key people would be the individual team coaches and staff members. I also suggested that team officials conduct background checks on individuals when appropriate and on a legal basis. Finally, putting a cap on how much wages can be placed on player propositions. It can help reduce fraud along with insider betting, which can have a direct effect on player performances in games and on the final outcomes of the games themselves. Thank you. Putting